Morning, Miss.
So today we are looking at three main areas. We are looking at process analysis essay. We are looking at combating nervousness while doing presentations. And then we will be looking at verbs and verb tenses, particularly, and parallelism as a stylistic feature in writing. Also, to let you know, between Friday and Sunday, your first quiz will be up on Canvas. So what this means is for the 72 hours between Friday, November 6th, Sunday, November 8th, it will be available. You set aside 2.5 hours anywhere in that 72-hour block to take your quiz. So the quiz is 2.5 hours long. And do not navigate away. Do not close the window and come back. If you close the window, wherever you reach is considered your final submission. You will not have access to the quiz again, right? So within the 72 hours between Friday and Sunday, set aside 2.5 hours uninterrupted to do your quiz. If you step away and the quiz times out, that is it, right? If you navigate away from the page, you lose access to the quiz. If you close the page before you finish, you lose access to the quiz. So make sure when you sit down to do the quiz, you have 2.5 hours uninterrupted to do the quiz, okay? So look out for it between Friday and Sunday. In that 72-hour block, you have, in that 72-hour block, a chance to do the quiz. There's only one attempt allowed per student. So be very careful that you do not step away. You do not end the session before you intend to. That 2.5 hours should also give you time to look over the quiz before you submit, right? To make sure you're submitting the answers you really intend to submit. Okay? Is that clear?
Yes, Miss.
Right. So let's start today by looking at parallel structures. So today we are looking at what a parallel essay is. And how you go about, process analysis, 3-4, right? And then we will also be looking at verbs, parallel structure, and avoiding stress in speaking scenarios. And then for our Zoom session, we will break out into different rooms. You will each have up to 3 minutes to give your extemporaneous speech. While the person is speaking, audience, take note of vocal delivery, eye contact, and other both linguistic and paralinguistic modes of communication in the presentation, and offer positive feedback. Well, constructive, not just positive, constructive feedback. We will share the constructive feedback in the general group. So we will break out, let's say in groups of 4, you will have a total of 15 minutes to organize yourselves and deliver your speech, no more than 3 minutes each. And then when we come back, we will share our observations and insights. This way, everyone will get a chance to deliver their speech and get some practice, right? So first up, process analysis. So a process analysis, if we're remembering that expository writing is a way of explaining, right? So an expository essay is your chance to explain something. So the process analysis is a specific type of explanation where you outline step by step how an activity is done, right? You can think of it as an elaborate recipe where you explain each step in adequate detail. So it's not just enough to say step 1, stick your foot in the sock. Step 2, stick your foot in the shoe. Step 3, tie your shoelaces. It'll be a little more detailed at that. You're explaining how the process works by explaining how each step works, right? So I'm hoping you're beginning to see why we started with analysis by division. Because technically, that skill that you learn for analysis by division, right, filters into or can be adapted to other styles of explanation. So here we're taking a process and we're breaking it down into its individual steps and explaining each step. So if we are looking at really explaining the process and to make a good process analysis essay, you need to ask yourself a few questions. So what are the steps in the process? So these are your larger, these would be your topic sentences, the larger parts or the larger sections, right? So the process is the overall thing. Step 1, step 2, step 3, these are the main subsections or the main things you have to get done. Then in these steps, what is the sequence or stages? So what do you need to do in sequential order in each step to achieve that step, right? So if we go back to the shoe analogy or the shoe example, putting on your shoe is the process. Step 1 is putting on your socks. To achieve putting on your socks, you first, if it's short socks, you make sure the opening for your foot is nice and clear. You roll it a little bit to the toe. You stick it on your toe. You pull it up over your heel. Step 1, 2, 3. That's putting on your socks. After you put on your socks, then you're going to stick your foot in the shoe. To stick your foot in the shoe, loosen the laces, pull up the tongue, slip your foot in the shoe. Step 3 is tying the laces. Adjust the tongue so that it's not bunched up to cause any undue squeezing. Pull the laces tight, but not too tight that you cut off circulation. And then tie a bow with a secure knot. So you see, we take the process of putting on a shoe. We break it down into 3 steps: putting on your socks, putting on the shoe, tying the shoelaces. And then we break down each step even further and to explain how you put on your sock, how you put on the shoe, and how you tie shoelaces. So for example, let's say you're writing an essay on how to write essays. So to write a good essay, so that's the process, writing a good essay, you need to brainstorm and plan, draft and redraft, and edit and re-edit. So brainstorm and plan is a step, draft and redraft is a step, and edit and re-edit is the 3rd step. So we take that overall process of how to write a good essay And we break it down into each individual step. So here's an example of a process analysis essay. And again, if you haven't had a chance to read through it just yet, it is here, read through it. It is annotated so you can see how the essay is actually put together. So it's a good example that you can follow. And see just how you do your process analysis essay. So again, the process analysis essay is taking a process or a procedure, something that might be a little complex, and you break it down first into the steps, the main steps that you need to do, and then you break down each step into the different stages, right? So it's process, step, stages, and that's how you break it down. So you have two examples here. And now let's look at how you would do a process analysis outline. As a matter of fact, give me 1 second. So as you can see with the process analysis essay, and then I use, bang for my buck, I used how to write an essay as my process analysis. So you see how we split down writing an essay into first 3 major steps, and then the stages in each step, so that we are explaining the process of writing that essay. And also I would recommend that you follow those 3 steps when writing your essays: pre-writing, drafting, and editing. So this is just a little education quote. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. We do too little of this these days. But yes, the idea of especially if you are trying to explain something or having something explained to you, or as you do research and so on, just because you have a thought or a source has a thought doesn't mean we should hold on to it. It takes further analysis. So the next thing we are looking at is public speaking. And here's a checklist of things to do before you prepare. I mean, before you give your speech. This checklist will help you feel prepared and confident going into the your presentation. So the more prepared you are, the less nervous you will be, right? So, find out who the audience is supposed to be, organize your thoughts, practice. We can never stress enough how to practice, that you must practice. Always have, if you're using visual aids, have a backup, right? Because there will come a time when, your laptop might freeze, you might not be able to find that your favorite USB, your thumb drive. You might not be able to find it. You need to put it on something else. You might want to email it to the host so that it's ready to load, even if, something happens. So, make sure to calm yourself. Do whatever measures that, help you be calm. Make sure everything is in order, fully charged if you're going to use your own devices and so on. Get yourself familiar with your environment so you feel more comfortable. And depending on what you have to do, if you're in a conference, for example, make sure, I know for me, nervousness is also keeping other people back from speaking. So I like to be prepared. I like to have everything grabbable and movable when I'm finished speaking, and that kind of, stuff like that. So this checklist helps to alleviate some of the jitters. So I have these things locked down. So at the event, there are less things for me to worry about, less things for me to think about. So you can go over this checklist when you're preparing to do presentations, go over. So that act of ticking off things on a checklist actually calms you down quite a bit because you feel like you're making progress.
Grammarly helps make your writing clear and concise, no matter where you are. With Grammarly on your computer.
The famous writer and public speaker Mark Twain once said that there are two kinds of public speakers. One, those who get nervous, and two, liars. Getting nervous before and during a presentation are completely common, and you don't have to let it affect your performance. So in this video, we're going to talk about some mindsets, some realizations that you should have going into presenting, and also some practical tips to help manage that nervousness. Coming up. So let's talk about some realizations and then some practical tips. The first realization is that you do not look as nervous as you feel. I was recently coaching some presenters, and one of the speakers finished and she said, "Oh my gosh, I was so nervous." Now, she had done a good job, but I didn't realize she was nervous. So I said to her, on a scale of 1 to 10, how nervous were you? And she said, 10 out of 10. I was freaking out. And I asked the people watching, the other participants, how nervous did she look? And they said about a 2. So she felt 10 out of 10, top of the scale in nerves. But we couldn't tell. She looked totally composed and normal. She did a great job. So just this one realization alone, I think, is really powerful, is that you do not look anywhere near as nervous as you may feel on the inside. And that alone should, I think, relax you. The second realization is just because you're nervous, it doesn't mean you're not doing a great job in that moment. So another presenter said after, on a recent coaching session, she said, "Oh my gosh, I blacked out. I totally don't remember even what I did." I don't know if she actually blacked out, but that's how she described it. She was detached from what was happening. Even though she felt detached, she did a great job, total home run. She did the best I've ever seen her. So just because you feel nerves and they may be getting the best of you, it doesn't mean that you're not actually performing excellently. Keep that in mind. The third realization is that nervousness and excitement are really two sides of the same coin. Bruce Springsteen, a famous musician, talked about how early on you get very nervous, a lot of stage fright before he would perform, and then you realize, wait a minute, this is like excitement. This is the same thing as, I'm excited to go play music for a huge crowd. It gets me going. And so public speaking is a lot like that. You should be a little excited. It doesn't have to be thought of in your mind as, I'm really nervous. You know, you can say, hey, you know what, I'm excited. So you can even take a little control over your thoughts in that way. So those are some realizations. Let's get now to some practical tips. First practical tip is to practice like crazy, and here's why. In my experience, and I've been coaching professional speakers and coaching college students to do presentations for about 20 years now, 95% of the results that you get during your presentation are worked out during your practice time. So if you practice like crazy and really prepare well, that presentation is most likely going to go very well. About 95% of that is all worked out. So even if you're nervous, even if a couple of little things go wrong, it's almost always going to come out pretty much the way you practiced it. So that's a great understanding of the process, and that hard work does pay off, and you can get, and so you should make that practice as realistic as possible. Maybe even have a couple of distractions in there, that's fine. If you make a mistake, don't start over, push through it. If you feel nervous, don't rehearse talking about to yourself or out loud how nervous you are, because then you might do that during the presentation, and that usually makes things worse. So work that out through practice. The second concrete tip is, as you are preparing, you want to focus everything on your audience and your message. If you're at all focused on yourself, that's going to spike your nerves. So a comedian is trying to get people to laugh. They're working on their joke. They're not thinking about how they come across. They're working for their outcome. They're working for their good performance. If you're trying to train people, you should be focused on getting them up to speed so they really do know how to do this. If you're trying to share a message, focus on saying it in a way that's going to land and it's going to stick so that everybody gets the most benefit. Anytime we start thinking about how am I coming across, do I look professional, do I look nervous, or are people going to judge me, it's going to lead in the wrong direction. You have to totally flip it and think about your audience and your message. The next tip is to visualize yourself doing it well, especially the opening moments, that first 10 to 20 seconds. Now, when I say visualization, I don't mean anything weird or experimental or new agey. I mean it the way athletes do it. In other words, before a batter comes up to swing, that batter is going to put himself in the right state of mind so that he visualizes himself hitting the ball well. Adam Vinatieri used to be a kicker for the New England Patriots, and in the 2001 Super Bowl against the St. Louis Rams, the clock was running down. They were tied 17-17. This is like high pressure situation for a kicker, and he successfully kicked a 48-yard field goal with 2 seconds left on the clock. The clock was running. There was no timeouts. It was running, and he did it, and they won the game. And after the game, people said, you know, how did you do it? You know, the most pressure that any kicker has been under ever. And he said, I have made that kick 1,000 times. And he meant it in his life, you know, in his mind. In a kicker's life, that is the moment they live for. And he had visualized himself doing it successfully 1,000 times. So that in that moment, it felt like he was just doing it one more time. So when you're picturing yourself in the room, setting up your visual aids, getting ready, and that first 10 or 20 seconds of the presentation, you're picturing it happening successfully, picturing the steps it takes to get there, then you're going to be set up for success. So those are the tips I have for not being as nervous. I recommend you use them in your next presentation. Look forward to your comments below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. God bless.
So he gives some useful tips here on how to avoid feeling nervous. Nervousness is not 100% unavoidable. So don't think you would ever walk into a session and, you know, I feel absolutely no nerves whatsoever, right? There will always be a point where you feel a little nervous, but try and make that nervous feeling positive. Translate it into a kind of excitement or energy. Ooh, let's get it over with. Let's get it done. I'll use myself as an example. I have been doing conferences and presentations for at least, well, 11 years, about 11 years. The first time I did a presentation, I was so nervous I could barely look up. And I try to remember that one little tip. You pick at least one person in the audience and you look at them so the audience feels you making eye contact, even not specifically with each individual member. And it was a packed hall, so I would say it was about maybe 100 people there for the conference. Adding to the nervous, I was presenting on an author who was actually in the audience. So she could, you know, hear our thoughts on what she did, and she could very well object if she felt like it, so that added to the nervousness. But really looking up ever so often and trying to make that human connection and expel that nervous energy helped me get through that presentation. Even up to last week Saturday, when I moderated a webinar for the university, I was still nervous. I felt the same, almost the same level of nerves. So getting rid of nerves is not 100% possible. I don't care how long you've been presenting. What happens is you learn as you go along ways to you know, diminish that nervousness, to work that nervousness in your favor, right? Let's look at another video offering some tips on how to deal with stress and anxiety.
For 7 years, I presented the news on television. And every Thursday, I was there in front of my camera, and I heard the director in my ears saying, "Attention Studio for Live, 5, 4, 3. And every Thursday, I felt my heart racing every week, 7 years. Now, I tell you this because there is this huge misunderstanding that experienced speakers, they are not nervous. When you see that speaker on stage and you say like, well, they do it in a natural way. No, they don't. They are nervous. But the difference for me between an experienced and an inexperienced speaker is that experienced people know how to handle the nerves. And I want to give you this insight because it really helped me a lot to deal with my nerves. Because it all begins with the brain. That's why my explanation begins, because you have to look at your brain as having these different antennas, and your brain really wants to protect yourself, and it takes that job very seriously. So as soon as the antennas perceive a kind of danger, a button is pushed. It's a button somewhere here in your head, in your brain, and it's called the amygdala. It has the shape of an almond, the color of an almond. It is small as an almond, but it's a very important button, because as soon as the button is pushed, that's what we call the fight or flight reaction. You have all these sensations in your body, typically the things that you experience when you are nervous, like a dry mouth, legs shaking, your heart really beating very fast, your respiration is going faster. And this is something that actually is there to protect yourself, because as it is a fight or flight reaction, imagine that there is this car nearly racing into you when you cross a road. The fact that you have this heartbeat that is fast, it actually prepares you to react and to run, actually. Now, the thing is, when you stand in front of an audience, you cannot run. So the antennas, they don't make a difference between a real danger and a danger in your head. So what happens is when you in front of your audience, you cannot run, you kind of freeze, but still you have these sensations, so you want to protect yourself. Now, this is on a subconscious level. What happens on a conscious level is that actually, when you stand in front of your audience, you want to protect yourself. So actually by doing this, now this is overdoing it. But to some extent, that's what speakers actually do in front of an audience. You stand like that, you really want to protect yourself, looking down or looking very quickly from one person to another. Now, what does an experienced speaker do? Exactly the opposite. They, on a conscious level, they make themselves big in front of the audience. You could say that they fake it. Making yourself big, what I mean with that is having that posture in front of your audience that gives you a kind of a positive attitude. Now, to know what that is, just watch television. You can really learn a lot from it. And I advise you to look especially at people, for example, presenting the news, but people standing, because that's the most difficult thing to do, how to stand in front of that audience, what to do with your arms, what to do with your legs. Just look at how they stand and imitate that, because this is a good neutral position. Same thing for the way you look. A tip that I have there is that you actually look at your audience as though you pour them a glass of wine, because this will help you to stay with one person. You look at one individual at a time. The time it takes to pour them a glass of wine, to avoid that you would either look away or look very nervously from one person to another. So the next time you experience these nerves, what I advise you to do is stand and look in a conscious way. Just watch television to know what that can be, and watch TED.com, because on that website you have all these presentations with PowerPoint, without PowerPoint. Look at it without volume, because it helps you to look how they stand. What I absolutely advise you to do is watch Amy Cuddy. She's an expert on body language, and this is exactly what she's talking about faking it. So just have a look, imitate, integrate, and make it your own.
So again, some tips on how to reduce nervousness. And you notice again that we're saying there's no way to eliminate it 100%. But if you are aware that you will be nervous before a speech, there are things you can do to make yourself feel more confident. is a lot of, when we talk about kinesics, for example, and that body language, you know, there's body language that would expose your level of nervousness. And this would affect how your audience feels about you. Right? So we pay attention.
She's the senior producer and
To that. Let's watch some more tips.
reporter at Entertainment City, but she's here with us today to get rid of our fear about public speaking. Terry Hart. Hello. This is an important one, okay? I threw this out to the audience before you even got here. Like, who is deathly afraid of public speaking? Put up your hand. Yeah. See? This is the norm. Mm-hmm. This is what we're seeing everywhere. We see it, you know, across gender, across race, the socioeconomic, whatever. People don't want to speak in front of an audience.
No, people are terrified of it, to the point that some people rank it, and maybe some of you folks rank it, higher than the fear of death. So we're going to try and bring that down a notch today, okay? Public speaking should not be scarier than death.
Right.
So, but I think that one of the things is people are afraid to fail at it. And the overriding concern is that people think, I should just be able to do this. Is that what you think? Like, why can't I just stand up and speak? Well, I couldn't do a marketing presentation or an audit or anything that somebody else has been trained in without doing the work around it. Yeah. So public speaking is something that you can get better at with a little bit of work and some tips and tricks and a few things that I think you should just get out of your head that are kind of old myths about public speaking.
So what are the myths that we tell ourselves to get through it?
So one thing, we've all heard this, right? Imagine your audience naked or in their underwear. Don't do that.
I've never done that.
Yeah, don't do that, especially if it's at work, because nobody needs to see that with your colleagues. You really don't. But the thing is, the reason that that exists is it somehow puts you so that you're putting your audience as your adversary.
Yeah.
And your audience isn't your adversary. They're there to learn something from you. You're the expert, and they're there to help you. You guys clapping when we start this helps us.
That's right.
So when you are public speaking, whether it be 5 people or 500, trust that they're on your side.
Absolutely.
Another thing that's out there is that you should rehearse on your, device or in front of a mirror. Don't do that.
So you never do that, huh?
I never do.
I don't do that either.
I think it's a terrible idea. We should never see ourselves speak. It's unnatural. Like, it's not, and what you're looking at in the mirror is never what anybody else is paying attention to. Mm-hmm. They're paying attention to what you're saying. So focusing on yourself in the mirror or an iPhone, you're going to be paying attention to what you shouldn't be. Pay attention to the words.
So you're thinking of, like, so my lip does a weird thing. I will stare at that lip thing.
Totally.
Right? Like, that's all I'm looking at. I'm not even thinking about what I'm saying. Or you're going to stare at that imperfection that you believe in your head you have. The audience is not aware of it at all. No. You once saw yourself in an interview with Robert Pattinson. What did you do?
I sneezed.
Okay.
And it was on television. And so I, of course, obsessively watched that sneeze over and over and over. And I looked terrible sneezing. Everybody looked, but we're not supposed to see it. It's why our eyes close naturally when we sneeze.
Yeah.
So I feel the same way about public speaking. I feel like we shouldn't see how our mouth moves, what our eyes do, because nobody's paying attention to that.
Yeah.
They're paying attention to what you're saying.
Okay, so what should we do? You have an acronym that really helps you with your own public speaking appearances.
Yeah, so I've done a bunch of corporate coaching around this, Trace, and I found that people needed kind of a few steps to go through. So I came up with an acronym, and I use this acronym for myself 22 years later every time I do anything in public. So the acronym is BRIEF. B-R-I-E-F.
What's the B for?
The B stands for believe. Believe what you're saying. Oftentimes, we're asked to give speeches or a presentation, and we get notes from marketing or communications or our bosses, and they aren't words that ring true. Maybe there's something in there that just doesn't roll off your tongue. Yeah. Spend the time and make sure you believe everything that's coming out of your mouth. That's step 1.
Okay, because if you believe it, you will feel it and be able to present it in a way that you feel confident about, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and the R?
Rehearse.
Yes.
Now, this isn't, there's no exact way to rehearse properly. You have to find your own right way. But a really good kind of standard is your text, your script, your presentation should be completed 2 days before your event. Now, if you're waiting on approvals from a boss or communications or marketing, tell them that. Ask for what you need. Say, I need this 2 days before so I can get my rehearsing in. You're allowed to ask for what you need when you're the expert standing in front of the room.
That's right. How do you rehearse? Because I do the shower. I do it in the shower.
So
The night I use my dog and my kids. Yeah, and like I'm losing you guys. Come on, pay attention.
This is a moment. This is a moment. I usually run through it twice the night before and 3 times the morning of.
Good for you.
And I do it in front of my husband or my tribe, I like to say. I have a tribe. And your tribe, they want to hear the whole thing. If they're really your tribe, they don't want to just hear snippets. They want to hear the whole thing. So find your tribe.
Okay.
And
they'll be honest with you.
They will be honest with you, where it's working, where it's not working. And I also do it standing up. I don't do it slouching on a couch. I don't do it. I actually give myself the body memory that I need to be in that moment the next day.
I love that. Okay, so that is rehearsed. We have I, E, F, and only a minute left. So
okay, interesting. Trust that you are. Trust that what you're saying is important to the people who are hearing it. As much as you've rehearsed it, this is the first time they're hearing it. It's interesting. Believe that.
It is. It is. What you have to say is specific because you're the only person that has that information. Trust that. E?
Edit.
Yeah.
Don't try to fill a time in an agenda. Make what you're saying concise, important, and only what needs to be there.
Okay, I struggle with that one too sometimes. So that's a very good tip. And F stands for?
Fun.
Yeah.
You're the expert. And I don't mean top hat and cane fun. You don't have to do a show. And I don't mean necessarily tell jokes. Unless you're good at that, then have at her.
Yeah.
But I just mean smile.
Yeah.
Enjoy the moment. Everybody looks nice smiling.
It's true.
And if you smile, your audience is going to respond to that. And it is fun. You are giving people information that they need.
And you're in a position where people want to listen to you. So use that to your advantage. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Terry, such great empowering words. Can we hear it for Terry? Give us love.
So I would like to add some caveats here, because she does talk about she does 2 things. She kind of contradicts herself. She talks about not practicing in front of a mirror, but then she says, find your own way to practice. Now, if you are relatively new to public speaking, you're not watching in the mirror to focus on, what you might usually look at if you're putting on makeup or shaving or whatever. You're not looking at that. What you're looking for is to see those natural tics, movements that you might have when you speak. Trinidadians like to speak with our hands. Sometimes our hands all over the place. So you kind of look, is that distracting? What do I want to do with my hands? How do I control that? So what you're looking for when we practice in front of the mirror is actually your natural kinesics and how you could then enhance that or control that or mitigate that so that it's not distracting your audience from the message. She also said that people are more interested in what you have to say than what you look like. Again, I think that's not 100% accurate, and I want to alter that a little bit. Remember that the way you dress, the way you comb your hair, the way you present yourself, right? So that idea of body language, you make yourself bigger, you open up your chest, you square your shoulders, you present yourself as if you know what you're doing and you're confident. People will pay attention to that as well as the words. That's part of the message. So she's right in saying people are interested in the message you have to give. But remember, in delivering the message, it's both what you say and your paralanguage communication. How you move your body, making eye contact, modulating your voice, and so on. So early on, practicing in the front of the mirror gets you accustomed to your natural habits. And then you can start to assess, do I need to tone this down? Does that help enhance the meaning? And so on. So I would not rule out practicing in front of a mirror, especially early on, so that you can pick up on your own, what we call idiosyncrasies, the habits that are personal to you, and whether these habits will help or hinder being able to deliver that message. So let's, we will continue. We will look at some more.
Expect to have stress right before your presentation. Remember, it will help you do your best. Here are 6 suggestions for handling stress before you present. Visit the room where you will be speaking. Walk around and visualize how the room will be set up. If you arrive the evening before your program, try to do that then. Get a good night's sleep. Eat your normal meals. If you normally exercise, try to do that ahead of time to reduce stress. Rolling your head, yawning, and making funny faces can also help you relax your face, your throat, and your neck. Plan to deal with a dry mouth. Most speakers make sure they have water available. Here's another idea. Suppose I have a thick, juicy lemon in my hand. Then I take out a knife and I slice the lemon in half. The juice runs all over my hand. Did you salivate? This is a simple way to deal with a dry mouth. Just think about lemons. Here's another suggestion. Carefully bite the side of your tongue with your back teeth, or lightly bite the inside of your cheek. Both of those will cause you to salivate. They really do work. Be in the presentation room early so you can check everything. For example, I usually always request to have a table in the room, and I usually never have the table when I get there. However, since I'm there early, I have plenty of time to arrange to have a table brought into the room. I like to try to talk to some audience members before I begin. Often I find people to use as examples of my major points. I ask them if I can call on them during the program and ask them to share the point. It's a great way to get the audience involved. It takes the spotlight off of me as a speaker and puts it on the audience. Avoid negative thoughts and negative people. Think positive. Make affirming statements, such as, I really know this material. I have information to share. I am so glad to be here. I'm so glad the audience is here. Try these ideas and see what works for you. Just know to expect stress, but know that you can handle it in a professional manner. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out our Medical Presentation Essentials course and register for a free trial account, which will give you access to selected videos and quizzes from the course. You can earn CME credits with every Med Mastery course.
So she has some interesting tips, more mental exercises, apart from practicing. You know, as we grow older, as we deal with life, we learn ways to alleviate stress in various ways, because life is, quite frankly, stressful. And putting those things in practice helps a whole lot. So when you have to do some kind of speech, right? You're in a calmer place. And once you're in a calmer place, that will then help you alleviate stress. So we have a few more. And then we can look at some examples, right? So we have a few more.
For 7 years, I presented the news.
I knew I had this somewhere. All right. Good. That means we've seen this one before. It's when you actually don't trust yourself.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Public Speaking. Today's first presenter is Ranjit, and I would ask everyone to give him their full attention. Chantal, could you dim the lights, please?
The British imposed a lot of unpopular taxes on the American colonists and didn't let them elect representatives to the British government. In retaliation, the Americans started to boycott British goods. In 1773, Americans in Massachusetts dumped a shipload of British tea into Boston Harbor. This became known as the Boston Tea Party. As punishment, the British imposed laws known as the Intolerable Acts, including the Quartering Act, which made Americans let British soldiers live in their homes. Some of the American colonies created a Declaration of Rights and Grievances, which they sent to Britain, but the British just sent soldiers to the colonies to put down any rebellion. This led to the first battles of the Revolution at Lexington and Concord.
Thank you, Ranjit. I know it's very hard to give a presentation in front of the entire class. Now, would anyone like to offer Ranjit constructive feedback about his presentation? Any tips for what he might do differently next time? For example, were you all able to hear what Ranjit was saying?
Not really. He needs to speak louder and face the audience.
Yes. Great suggestion. Anyone else?
He was reading from his paper, so it didn't feel like he was really talking to us, you know?
Exactly. It's important when you're speaking to look up every sentence or two and make eye contact with someone in the audience. Anything else that Ranjit could do to appear more relaxed and feel more confident?
He could smile more.
Yes, smiling makes us feel relaxed. Oh, and make sure your phone is off before you speak next time. I do have one more suggestion. To connect with listeners, it's a great idea to use a personal story or experience as an example. Can you try that next time?
I think so, yes. Next week, my presentation will be about the causes and effects of stress.
We look forward to hearing it. Ranjit is first up again today, and I look forward to his new presentation. Jorge, could you dim the lights, please?
Good morning. Today I'd like to talk about the causes and effects of stress and how to cope with stress. Stress has many causes, including work or school, life events, changes, or unrealistic expectations of yourself. Some effects of stress include headaches, trouble sleeping, depression, or lack of concentration. I know how hard it can be to deal with stress. Last year, I started working after school to save for college, but I didn't have time to do homework and my grades went down. I had trouble sleeping, I only ate junk food, and I stopped hanging out with my friends. Fortunately, I was able to talk with a school counselor to manage my stress. She suggested that I reduce my hours at my job, eat healthy foods, and get some exercise. So I literally started walking home from school and bringing my lunch. I also asked my teachers for extra help. Now, I feel better. It's important to recognize when you're stressed and to ask for help. Thank you.
Great work, Ranjit. I want you all to reflect on how much stronger today's presentation was. Ranjit looked us in the eyes, he spoke clearly, he smiled at us, and he used a personal anecdote to help us feel more connected to him. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
So in this example, we have the same student giving a speech. The first time you can see the nerves. You can see how nervous he is. You can even see with the body language, how he has curved into himself. When he is speaking, he does not look up. He reads robotically. So all these things are suggesting that he is not confident in what he's doing and he's very nervous. The second time around, his body language is different. He's standing in a more open position. He's making eye contact. He even shares personal anecdotes. And he's not completely dependent on the piece of paper in his hand. This suggests, one, a level of preparation, and two, as the previous speaker said, feeling confident that what you have to say is interesting and the audience wants to hear it from you. So these are some things that help to alleviate that nervousness when you have to present. It will never completely go away, but if we are conscious that we're going to be nervous, then we have choices that we can use that nervousness to our advantage. We could turn it into excitement, that kind of excited feeling, because they are very similar, which means we could then use it to trick ourselves into thinking, this is going to be fantastic, this is going to be wonderful, and I'm going to get through this, and everyone wants to listen to me, and this is going to be an exciting and interesting time. So here are some, what they call the 10 commandments of confident speaking. So some of the things we will be stressing again. Remember that you are the expert. No one else, you are there to explain something no one else has yet explained, or no one has explained in the way you can explain it. So even if it's a topic that's been covered, the way you explain it is unique to you. And you have the ability then to fully explain something in a way no one else can. Right? If you are the expert, then it should reflect in your posture. If you remember that you are the expert, then you are more confident. Your posture will become more confident. You will stand up straighter. You will stick out your chest. You will look people in the eye. You would know in the back of your mind, hey, this is what they wanted. This is what they need to hear, because I'm the one with the information to give them. Smiling helps. As the presenter again on the little news show, and she talked about smiling. Smiling alleviates your own tension. It also breaks a barrier down between you and your audience. So when we talk about communication barriers, that smile, because you seem confident, because you seem to be having fun, people will have fun with you. If you think of the reverse, usually when we're in a situation and someone starts to cry, we have a sympathetic response, or at least, most humans have a sympathetic response, and they will start to feel sad themselves. They might even start to cry, because that physical representation of the emotion elicits a physical mirroring in the audience. So smiling, if you keep smiling, you put the person at ease. They are more likely to smile. They are more likely to accept your message and engage in the whole public speaking process. Right? That goes, as they say, for being grateful, showing your appreciation, thanking the audience for giving you their time. The audience then feels appreciated, and they feel that it's voluntary to give you their time, and so they will be attentive. Prepare, rehearse, have a backup plan. So we talked about this a little bit. Prepare. If you're doing, especially if you're doing extemporaneous, scripted, or memorized speech, write it out. Make sure it's all planned out. Rehearse it so you understand the plan. You know what you want to say. Have a backup plan. So even if you read it wrong, or you skip a point in your outline and you need to go back to it, be prepared to be prepared to be adaptable. If you had a presentation and the video was supposed to show and the video doesn't show, don't let it derail you. You might even crack a joke about that and technology and how technology will mess with you. Explain what the video was about, so you should know what the video was that you were going to use. Explain what it was about and move on, right? So you want to prepare for the best and the worst, and make sure that whatever crops up while you're doing your presentation, it will not derail you. Preparing will help you be clear on your intent, know what you're there to say, know what the main purpose of your speech is, what's the main idea, and what you're trying to do, right? Knowing how you want, knowing your intention and knowing what you want to do will also help you choose your language so that you are not inadvertently introducing things you don't want. Remember, there's a difference between intent and impact. If you know your intent, you can craft your language to ensure that the impact doesn't vary very much from what you intend to say, right? So again, language and paralanguage. So know what you're trying to say and why you're trying to say it, and that will help you in giving a good speech or public presentation. As the speaking coach said, focus on the audience and not on yourself. You are talking to the audience. Your point is, and your audience is a receiver. You want to make sure that the audience feels engaged in the entire communication process. So when we talk about feedback, and I don't think I elaborated on this clearly enough. When we talk about the feedback in the communication process, we're talking about those verbal and non-verbal cues you get from your audience, right? So when we're speaking and you see people crossing their arms or looking away, or they're fishing in their pocket and they're not paying attention, we need to be able to adjust, because that's a specific kind of feedback that we're getting, right? As speakers, as teachers, we are getting the feedback that we're losing the audience, so let's try and get back the audience, right? They might clap, they were like, you know, so if you go in a church setting, for example, the positive murmurs, the response, the call and response, all these things are active feedback in that communication process. That helps us as the sender adjust how we're delivering the message, because we can see in real time how the message is being decoded by the receiver. As the Australian presenter said, be early, the medical one, the video with a nice little old lady. Be early. Several of the videos actually stress this, being familiar with your presentation space. So if you are, granted, we're not traveling anywhere right now for COVID, but this is proxemics, knowing where you're going to present, knowing where you're giving the speech, setting it up in advance so that it makes you comfortable. Positive visualization. So number 8, visualize the outcome you want. Don't dwell on the things that could go wrong, dwell on the things that could go right. So again, this helps to alleviate nervousness, because if we dwell on what can go wrong, I think everyone has heard of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you think things are going to go wrong, guess what? You're going to make them go wrong. If you think something is going to go right, 9 out of 10 times it's going to go right. Right? Trust that you are there. The audience is there to help, to listen to you and support you. So that, you know, you are doing a good job. Trust that. that you are doing a good job. Don't start to doubt yourself in the middle of your presentation. Don't doubt yourself before, during, or after, right? And then manage your energy. So especially if you are nervous, and that's again why I recommend standing in front of the mirror and practicing. If you have a nervous tick, say you shake your legs a lot and you're not going to have a podium to hide it, or you drum a lot, or when you might be one of those people, instead of going and pausing, you and pause and you right? So you want to control that, because those are signs of nerves. They're distracting, and you have the opportunity to actually know yourself, know your body, know your natural responses, and then manage that. Be very conscious of it. All right, this is just again just throwing out some philosophy things there for people, right? So the next thing we are looking at, so we looked at writing a process analysis essay. We looked at how to mitigate nervousness when you're doing public speaking. So now we're looking at the third main thing we're supposed to do today. We're looking at verbs, tenses, moods, and so on. And then we will look at parallel structure, so a way of finessing your writing, a technique in making your writing more interesting. So first up, verbs.
Yes, I'm not seeing anything.
My apologies. I think I switched off the. Let's try that again. You seeing something now? Yeah. So that's some simple, that's just an introduction to verbs. So let's take a look at breaking down verbs some more into the various tenses.
Oh, what a lovely time it was. How sublime it was too. I didn't know what day it was. You held my hand. Warm like the month of May it was, and I'll say it was great, great to be alive, to be young, to be mad, to be yours alone. Great to see your face, feel your touch, hear your voice, say I'm all yours. I did not know what year it was. Life was no prize. I wanted love, and there it was, shining out of your eyes. I'm wise, and I know what time it is now.
Right, so there are 12 tenses. You will notice that for the more complex tenses, for the continuous, perfect, and perfect continuous, it depends on a combination of helper verbs and the main verbs. So that is one way we can tell the difference between the tenses. So again, go over the video on your own time, take some notes, and so on. Knowing the tenses, of course, helps to avoid what we call green verbs or not conjugating your verbs properly, which is a major grammatical error. You notice in the video on verbs in general when we talked about participles, and also in creating the continuous, perfect, and perfect continuous, we use participles. So these are formations of verbs with either ing or ed endings, and they can be used as verbs and they can be used as other things. So let's take a closer look at participles.
your face, hear your voice, feel your touch. Say I'm on your own. I did not know what year it was. Life was no prize. I wanted love and everywhere, shining out of your eyes. I'm wise and I know what time it is now. I didn't know what time it was. Then I met you. Oh, what a lovely time it was. How sublime it was too. I didn't know what day it was. You held my hand. Warm like the month of May it was, and I would say it was grand, grand to be alive, to be young, to be mad, to be yours alone. Grand to see your face, hear your voice, feel your touch, say I'm all your own. I didn't know what year it was. Life was no prize. I wanted love and there it was, shining out of your eyes. I'm wise and I know what time it is now.
So if you're wondering why I put an asterisk next to the ED, the suffix we use when making a past participle isn't always ED. For example, past tense of spoke is speak is spoke. So we actually change it, or the past participle is spoken. So we change the spelling of the entire verb and we add a completely different suffix when we're making the participle. So the ED just stands for the suffix we use to make a verb a past participle. It's not always going to be ED. We don't say we eated, we ate, or we have eaten, EATEN, right? So just to make that clear, that asterisk there is to signal that ED is not the only ending that makes a verb a past participle. Now, sometimes, and this formula here is just in terms of practice and exposure, but knowing what preposition goes which verb is important. You don't agree to, you agree with. You argue with. You can argue about. So when I say argue about, you're talking about the subject matter you all were discussing. If you say you argue with, you're arguing with another person, right? You don't boast with, you boast about. You boast about something. So these are conventions in English. Ever so often you would see where people use the wrong preposition with the verb. And it's hard to explain. It's just not the convention. It's not the appropriate use of the preposition and verb. So it's technically, it's wrong, right? In specific, so if we look at the argue again, if I say I argued about her, it didn't mean I have a conversation with her. She was the topic of the conversation. If I argued with her, that means that the argument was between her and me, right? So the preposition can actually change the meaning of the sentence. So when you're writing your verb and making verb and preposition connections, be very careful. You follow the convention. So here are some common ones, right, that you can look over. Also remember, if you are using synonyms, most likely that preposition combination will apply to the synonym as well, right? So I would discuss with and not discuss to. Technically, you wouldn't discuss about, right? So we talked about sentence functions, and sentence functions are also built on the kind of verbs you use and the verb mood. So let's take a look at moods in verbs. So again, as we saw there, the different moods help us create the different functions of the sentence, right? So when we talked about the first mood, that is a declarative sentence. Interrogative mood obviously would be for interrogative sentences, and so on. Declarative, the indicative mood would be for stating commands, and so on and so on. So the different moods that we see here correlate with the different sentence functions that we covered earlier. So if you watch the two side by or back to back, you get a stronger understanding of how to create sentences to function differently by using verb moods. So the next thing we're looking at is a stylistic feature, parallelism. So as it says here, parallelism is a stylistic arrangement in which similar syntactic patterns repeat, thus allowing the reader or listener to rely on the grammatical repetition to echo the logical similarity of the thought, and thus improving the clarity and efficiency of the passage. So we're using a grammatical structure or syntactic structure, so how we write the parts of our sentence. So we're repeating that structure even if we are changing the words to create a parallel. So as in maths, when we learn a parallel, two lines that run alongside each other and that will never touch. So we can compare the two lines. So we use this idea in our writing, right? So when we look at parallelism, it's a form of repetition. We are repeating the structure or the form of our sentence. We can do it within sentences. We can do it within paragraphs. We can do it from paragraph to paragraph. You'll find this, use it everywhere. Essays, speeches, expressions or idioms, music, poetry, fiction, non-fiction, drama. We find parallel structures, right? So what parallelism helps you do is it creates a rhythm and a flow in your writing and in your speech, so that one, it is pleasurable to listen to. We fall into a pattern. Human brains like patterns, and we fall into a sound pattern when we use this kind of repetition, this parallelism. The structure sounds the same. Parallelism also helps you remember, so it helps the audience remember the message, because once again, that rhythm. So think about it this way: it's easier to remember a song than to remember a random speech. It's easier to remember a poem that rhymes, for example, than to remember a quote of prose. And that's partly because there's a rhythm there that we latch on to, and we can learn the words using the rhythm. So parallelism helps us introduce a rhythm and a flow, which then helps your audience to remember what you're saying because it's in a pattern that they can relate to. Right? So what you're looking for, as in the example here, right? What you're looking for in a parallel structure is that the words or the phrases or the clauses are built in the same way. So if I start with a verb, I want to start each phrase or clause with a verb, right? If I'm starting with a gerund, I want to keep using the gerund, and so on. So when we do a parallel structure, it helps us to compare and contrast because the structure is so similar. The audience is forced to look at the words. So they focus on the words. The words stand out because everything else is so similar. You can choose to disrupt parallelism or to deliberately make one element of the sentence not parallel to highlight a contrast, but we must be very careful because if it's not done well, it just reads as an error, right? So let's look at an example here. What you see is what you get. So in the first example, the phrases are structured exactly the same. We start with the that's a relative pronoun, personal pronoun, and verb. So what you see, relative pronoun, personal pronoun, verb. What you get, relative pronoun, personal pronoun, verb. In the other example, the parallelism is using a single word, being. Being Jim's friend means being constantly alert, right? So we are using the repetition of being. So being Jim's friend means being constantly alert. Now, if you break it down even further, we have a gerund. We have a possessive noun acting as an adjective. And then we have the noun. So being, gerund, Jim's, possessive noun acting as an adjective, and friend, noun. And if we look at the other structure, we have gerund, being, constantly, adjective, alert, noun, right? And the third one, we use an infinitive verbs. So to know her is to love her. So again, we have the infinitive verb to know, and we have the object form of a personal pronoun, her. And in the other structure, we have an infinitive verb to love and the objective form of the personal pronoun, her. So in this example, we are repeating specific structures. So either you're seeing repeating two clauses, you're repeating a specific word and the overall structure, or you're repeating using the infinitives, right? That's one example. We've also seen examples where in the list, if you are providing a list, right? I was walking, talking, laughing, right? So we're making sure that the items in the list are the same part of speech or start with the same part of speech, has the same structure so that we create that rhythm. So today we looked at writing a process analysis essay. Your main assignment from this class is to write, do the pre-writing for a process analysis essay, about writing a process analysis essay. And I've had some confusion with, I personally enjoy that topic. I find it's always fun to write about something that you're actually doing. It will help you solidify how you go about writing a process analysis essay. So you're going to outline for somebody, if you're going to explain to somebody how to write a process analysis essay. So you're going to determine the 3 stages of writing a process analysis essay. and then, the 3 steps in writing a process analysis essay, and then the stages for each step, right? Again, the information is embedded in the lesson on how to do a process analysis essay. Put it in your own words. How would you advise somebody, let's say somebody who missed this class and they didn't know how to write a process analysis essay? How would you go about writing an essay to teach them how to do that, right? So that's the assignment. The last thing we have today, we're going to split up into random groups of 4, and we are going to do our extemporaneous speeches in those groups, right? There's no more than 3, there's between 2 and 3 minutes per person. So we will split up for 15 minutes so that everybody in the group would have an opportunity to give their speech. While the person is speaking, jot down your notes, jot down your reactions. And when we come back in from the breakout room, we will share those notes and reactions in a general class, right? So I'm going to split you up now into groups of about 4. Okay, welcome back. So, purely on a voluntary basis, who wants to start?
I would like to start first.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so my group members were Amrita, Ratiram, Ashley, and Celine Mohammed. So I gave a speech about the most important lesson of my life so far is that everything in life comes at a cost. And I talked about a lesson that I have learned on why I thought this was the most important lesson in my life.
And how did, for those of you in her group, what is the feedback?
I think she needed a little bit more confidence.
She, what tipped you off that she might not have been as confident speaking?
Her vocals was a little bit plain and she looked down most of the time.
Okay. Shazana, were you aware that your vocal delivery was kind of flat and you were looking down a lot?
Okay, I was aware I was looking down, but not that the vocal delivery was kind of plain.
Did you practice before class?
Yeah, but like when you're there, it's like a different story.
Yes. So this should be an interesting experience for all of you. You know, we say practice, 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 but there's no guarantee that if you practice 1,000,000 times that nerves or suddenly being in that different setting and seeing other people watching you is not going to affect how you do, right? So specifically for a Zoom presentation, what you can do, right, is you see on the top of your Zoom dialogue, your Zoom screen, you will see speaker view and other alternatives. If you click it on speaker view, you will be the biggest thing, the biggest image on your screen. And so you could kind of ignore other people's expressions a little bit, or it's not as intimidating. And then look in the camera, make your eye contact, scan the people on the top to see how they're responding and make your eye contact so you feel a little more in control. So if you click on speaker view, turn on speaker view so that because you're the one speaking, you will fill the screen and you kind of then feel more in control. They're not forced faces staring at you and like, oh my God, everyone's watching every single thing I'm doing. So Zoom gives us a bit of an opportunity to really minimize that nervousness we feel because people are watching us. So, you're practicing by yourself. And again, practice with other people. If you can, practice in front of other people because that always helps, right? Who wants to go next? And let's say we'll just randomly go through at least five more, right? So who wants to go next?
Yes, my group was Bradley, Dominic, and Sahid, and we all said speeches. So I don't know which one you want to hear.
So you want to talk about, pick anyone. Which one stood out most to you and why? And what was your feedback on that?
I would think Dominic's speech because he included some stuff that I could relate to. He included young people. His topic was wealth. So he said that these days people in this world, they view wealth as material things alone, but that's not real wealth. So his eye contact, it was good. He was fluent, and I really liked how it compared, how I could relate to it.
Okay. Say the names again. Who else was in the group? And do you agree with Destiny? Do you have anything else to add with Dominic's speech?
Miss, I was also in the group and I agree with Destiny. His speech was very proper, like contact with us. And yeah.
Okay, and Dominic, how did you feel about your speech?
I felt confident. Just I make one little bad stop, but that was it.
Okay, did you all notice the one little bad stop, or was that in his head?
But it wasn't that noticeable. He just
didn't
mispronounced a word, that is all.
So remember when we were watching the video and the man suggested that you don't appear as nervous or stumbling to your audience as you feel? So bear that in the back of your mind. You might be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm crashing and burning. But your audience isn't seeing that. So trust that. The audience isn't seeing it. You're not doing as bad as you think you're doing. Right? And so use that, as Dominic said, he felt confident. So that helps if you think, well, I'm doing a very good job. It helps you actually do a very good job. Right? So 4 more.
Miss, I was in a group with Sabina, Destiny, and Colette. I think Colette's internet giving problems.
Okay.
Oh, she's back.
Yeah.
Colette's own stood out. She was, however, lacking eye contact a bit. She was clear though and precise. Um, she needed to, how would you say that? She needed to portray a little more attachment to her speech because it was an emotional one. Well, not emotion, but her emotions was expressed during her speech. I just think she needed to attach herself to the speech so it would have been a little more convincing and powerful. But her one was, it stood out to me.
And other Destiny, I'm not seeing you on the screen. All right, there you go. Destiny, how did you feel about Colette's speech?
Well, the same thing that Saskia said, it stood out to me because it was kind of personal and seemed like something that she would normally talk about, not just as a speech. Because it was about the future. I can't remember which one it was, but it was about the future and her health and things like that. So it seemed personal.
Manly, I'm enjoying the music, but it's a bit of a distraction for class right now. Thank you. You finished, Destiny? Go ahead. That was it?
Yeah, must have finished. And well, she took a few breaks in between with what she was saying too.
Okay, so Colette, how did you feel about the speech?
To me, it could have been better because I am not one to be afraid to speak with public speaking and these things. I have confidence in that aspect. So to me, it could have been better. I had a little distraction because I had a little distraction, but to me, it could have been better.
Okay.
It was better last class was better. It was put across better. It was delivered better. Everything was better. This time, not so much.
So did you get to practice beforehand? Did you outline, pre-write and these kind of things?
Yeah, I did, but I don't know. I just wasn't all that today.
Okay, but I'm hearing a difference between how your classmates heard the speech and how you felt about the speech. So that's interesting to note as well. So 3 more. Who else wants to go? Don't be shy. Francine?
Miss, I was in a group with Amrita, Beyonce, and another. Amrita's speech stood out. It was entitled "Intelligent is Not Enough." Her tone was even. It was very clear. It was well articulated also, but it was very short and the video was off. So I couldn't see any facial, non-verbal reaction. But in listening, her tone remained even and she was constant. The context of it was also great also. She had strong content.
Okay. Thank you. Anila, you were going to respond?
Yeah, I would agree with Francine. Well, we didn't see she's, so I wasn't sure, but the way her speech was put together, it was really good. That's it.
And Beyonce?
Her speech was short and simple, but I found she used a very
soft tone. She could have been a little more assertive.
Okay. And Amrita, how did you feel about your speech?
But I wasn't that confident of my speech because yeah, I was short, and I think I could have made it a little longer.
Okay. So you actually felt that you didn't spend enough time with your speech.
Yeah.
Okay. And so let's go 2 more.
I was in a group with Tahira, Davy, and Luke. For me, Tahira's speech stood out. It was engaging. She was clear. She made proper eye contact, and I could actually picture what it is she was speaking about.
Okay. And you went through the names kind of fast. Who else was in the group? Who else wants to comment on Tahira's speech?
I agree with Jillian. She was very clear. It was very interesting. Although she don't like animals, but it was very interesting. And it was kind of realistic.
Okay. And Tahira, how did you feel about your speech?
Yes, I felt about my speeches I practiced a lot, and I rewrite and I practice.
So you felt confident going in?
Yeah, I was the first one to deliver.
Okay. Yeah, that's a sign of you volunteer to go first. That's a sign of confidence, right? So I hope we're seeing with this exercise, and as we talked about how to allay those jitters, so to really downplay the jitters and get hold of it, how practicing usually helps. Colette is the only one so far who's had a different experience where she got to prepare beforehand and she felt she did a little worse than when she did the impromptu. It could be other circumstances like having other distractions and so on as well. It could be, and this is one of the warnings, I guess, if we say practice all the time, but the more you practice, the more familiar you get with your topic, the more you start to think everybody knows it, and your passion for the topic kind of dips a little bit before the speech. You actually give the speech because you feel everybody knows it, right? What I want to do is finish class with one more example. This is an example of a scripted speech. I would say the person practiced somewhere between 5 and 10 times before giving the speech, right? So let's just take a look.
Let's see now. Yeah. Hello, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I'm here to discuss something that troubles me as an educator, scholar, and a human being. I know we are in an incredible and unimaginable epoch, but in the midst of the chaos of a pandemic and the urgency of anti-racist protests around the world, we have time to mull, to muse, to question. One of the consequences of this extra time is the impetus around the world to tear down monuments of a violent past. What I want to address, which may seem tangential or too ephemeral, grows out of the same impetus. I want to discuss the power entrenched in one of the most widespread monuments to civilization, the very brick and mortar of our understanding of ourselves, words. Yes, words. The puffs of air and sound that we use every day, the abstract combination of letters meant to represent a concrete word, words. More to the point, I want to examine the power of words, the power of words to hurt, heal, and shape our reality. We need to pay attention to our words, the words we use, the words we ignore, the language we excuse, because these words are not innocent and innocuous. They carry the power to create our reality. My intention is not to convince you to abandon certain words or aim for a political correctness which substitutes words but leaves intentions intact. My goal today is to convince you that we need to pay attention to our words because words have power and we should wield them wisely. Words can hurt or heal. Often in anger or cold contempt, we can wound with insults and derogatory words. We fat shame, slut shame, all kinds of shame with words. We inflict racial slurs on each other like proverbial sticks and stones. We call each other stupid or vulgar or common. We drive these words deep into the gut, sometimes with a callous nonchalance, having spared nary a thought to the size or depth of the injury. Because words can, and all too often do, harm. We unleash these words in the pursuit of our own happiness, security, or revenge. And when we cup our souls in our hands, bleeding from the onslaught, our friends and allies, our linguistic nurses, patch us back up with words, heartfelt apologies, expressions of love and encouragement, poems, songs, stories, words. From this duality arises a persistent argument. Words can hurt or heal based on a person's intent. This is one of the major debates, especially in minority communities, concerning certain words. For example, the word nigger versus nigger. Recently, I had a Facebook conversation where my friend and I discussed the word is dual. For some, it is keener and hotter than lead. The ER is a trigger. For others, as my friend put it, it is a sign of community. The A is for acceptance. And it is not the only word commandeered by the oppressed. Other words like bitch and queer have been commandeered too. Are these attempts harmful or revisionist? To make a meaningful conversation about this, we need to understand words in a metaphysical way as reality shapers. They have the ability to conjure states into being. In some sense, we acknowledge this power on the personal level. Have you ever asked someone to put in a good word for you? To speak to a potential employer or mate for you? To create opportunity with well-meaning words? What about the caution to be careful what you wish for? Or the more positive version, speak it into being. These sayings remind us of the power of words. In another sense, we acknowledge this power on a universal level. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This divine Word formed land and sea, sky, sun, stars, and man. We create with words. The substantive message is true within and without the religious context. We can conjure nations with a declaration, broker peace with talks, create communities with hashtags. This translates into the power of words and language to shape our reality. You see, words are all we have to describe the world around us. Even more instantaneous than your cell phone camera is your friend firing off a description of an event. And this is the order of conversation. Words, then pictures. Words condition us. They tell us what the world is or should be, who we are or could be. So what does it mean when we use oppressive language to mean ourselves? I remember going out on a date with a young man many, many years ago. I remember the conversation there towards racial identity. I remember upsetting him by refusing to call myself Black. I explained that in Trinidad, I am Black. In the United States, I am Afro-Trinidadian. I remember his being frustrated and his response, Black is what they call you, the they being white Americans. He couldn't understand that I chose to call myself what I liked, when I liked, that I could choose at all, that I could object to someone else labeling me. You see, words shape how we view the world and ourselves in it. That is why Ngugi wa Thiong'o argued for writing in African languages first, to erase the hegemony of colonization that insisted Africans had no words sophisticated enough to describe and order reality, that Africans were not sophisticated enough to speak or dream. For many of us in the diaspora, this is a lesson of the languages we speak. We are taught the binary of civilizing European language versus the formulations of our own tongues. Our realities have been shaped by this power binary. We can eschew the language altogether, or like Derek Walcott, turn it into a weapon against oppression. Outmaneuver them in their own tongue. But we must be careful, for to quote Ali ibn Abi Talib, words are under your control until you speak them, but you come under their control once you have spoken them. Yes, we have power over words, but only if we are conscious. As Imam Ali says, a fool's mind is at the mercy of his tongue, and a wise man's tongue is under the control of his mind. If we are not careful, words will haunt us, undermine us, destroy us. This is the same with political correctness for political correctness' sake. It is not enough to replace words without replacing the intent. As Mother Teresa cautioned, words which do not give the light of Christ increase the darkness. But is it enough to replace intent without replacing the word? I started by calling words monuments. We build statues to venerate our heroes. They're historical artifacts for future generations who will dig up our monuments and assume we put them up in homage to the brightest and the best, the ideals of our society and culture. And so, I leave with a series of questions. Does repurposing derogatory words really divest them of their negative power? Does it recenter the hate and power structure behind the word? So I can transcribe it later. What did you like best about the speech?
Yeah, so that is an example of a scripted speech. I practiced, like I said, between 5 and 10 times before delivering that speech. And even in so doing, there were some pronunciation, well, actually articulation, not pronunciation errors. One of the feedback I got, they didn't understand I was saying words until about 2 or 3 times after I said words. Because I found it very hard to get that dental stop, that difference between the and the. So they were hearing worth and not words. And so I didn't practice saying that because in my head I was saying words, right? So if it is as all possible when you're practicing, if you record yourself at least once or twice so that you can actually pick up when you are making articulation or pronunciation errors, right? And thankfully we have technology now where we can pay attention to, we can listen back to ourselves to hear how we are performing the words, right? I debated whether or not to share it because it's an example of an extended definition. And so when we talk about that, we could talk, when we reach to that mode, we can talk about it a little bit more. But I just wanted to share for two reasons, that I've gone through the experience as well. And that no matter what stage you are, there's always room for improvement. So this goes back to visualizing your outcome. Visualize yourself giving a good presentation. So we have a presentation at the end of the semester that you will have to do. So from now, start preparing, start thinking, I'm going to do a good job. I am going to be confident. I am going to get through it. Build up that level of confidence as you prepare to do that presentation, right? So again, before we leave, I will open up to any questions that you might have. If there are no more questions, class is officially over. So I'll just hang around for a few minutes if there are any other questions or any questions you need to ask.
Miss, my question is about the quiz on over the weekend, right? Can you share some insight to us what is expected in an English quiz, what it's going to really be about? So
it's mostly covered grammar and communication.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
things like on verbs and all these things is expected, like correcting sentences and stuff like that, things like that. Okay.
I can't officially say.
Yeah?
I won't officially say. But so we've looked at subject-verb agreement. We've looked at conjugating verbs. We've looked at basic sentence errors that you might encounter. We've discussed communication and communication practices. So these are the things that would be on the quiz. What I will say is, just as you prepare for a presentation, take a deep breath. It's not the end of the world. You've been, as long as you've been going through the Canvas material, you've been absorbing the material, reflecting on it, really making it your own, you should do well in the quiz.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss.
Right. Any other questions?
Miss Excuse, you said that we have an assignment to do with the essay for the process analysis or something, like an outline.
Yes, you're writing an outline and an introductory paragraph.
But it's an essay?
No, it's just the outline and an introductory paragraph.
Oh, okay.
Right, so you're going to outline how you would write an essay about writing a process essay. So this is your opportunity again to internalize the information. How would you explain to someone in an essay form how you go about writing a process analysis essay? Right?
Miss, say basically just giving instructions.
Yes.
Okay.
So you outlining, so remember, in the same way we would do an outline for any other essay, you would outline a process analysis essay. So the key things you will need to know is what the process actually is, what are the steps in the process, and what are the stages in each step, right? So each step becomes your paragraph, a paragraph each for each of the major steps. So you're looking for 3 major steps. And then within each paragraph, you're going to explain the different stages in that step. And again, you're going in terms of a sequence, right? So what do I do first? what do I do next? What do I do third? And so on. So you're arranging, this is you arranging then how you would explain a process analysis essay. So the example, I kind of had to, because I already gave you all the example of writing an essay about writing an essay, I had to make it a little more specific. But if you look back at the example of the outline for how I would write a process analysis essay about writing essays, I took the process, writing an essay. I broke it down into 3 main steps: pre-writing, drafting, editing. So my first paragraph became about how you go about pre-writing something. My second paragraph was how do you go about drafting something? And my third paragraph was how you go about editing something, right? So what we learned in how you brainstorm a process analysis, what are the different stages in the process? So what are the stages of writing a process analysis essay? And then what are the steps? What are the steps? I keep mixing them up. Steps is the big one, stages is the smaller one. So what are the steps in writing a process analysis essay? What are the 3 main steps we need to do? And then you're going to break down each step into its individual stages, right? So, for example, you might say, pick a process to explain figure out the sequencing of that process, and then plan and write your essay, or organize and write your essay based on those things. That might be the 3 steps that you identify in writing a process analysis essay, right? So you're just doing an outline, so you don't have to write a full-fledged essay. I've said it before and I'll say it again. One of the benefits then of doing all these different outlines is when you come to doing the 2 samples for your portfolio, you don't have to rethink of an essay. You just pull out the outline, flesh out the outline. Your work is halfway done, right? So the idea is all the things we do in class should build up to you being able to flesh out that portfolio without too much stress, right? Any other questions?
Miss, that would be on Canvas, right?
Yes. It's on Canvas. Any other questions? So it's 11:47. I'm hungry. I don't know about the rest of you. So if there are no further questions, again, like I said, class is dismissed. Feel free to leave. And I will see you again next week, Tuesday, please God. Oh, and by the way, please spare a prayer for the US. Today is a scary day.
Yeah, miss, today's election.
Wish them all well and hopefully a good outcome. Right? So I will see you all next week, Tuesday.
Okay, thank you,
Bye,
miss.
Miss. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye, Miss. Bye, everyone.